Welcome back to the Smart Nonsense Podcast. I'm Henry. That is Dylan laughing his butt off. What do we do on Smart Nonsense? We talk about entrepreneurship, self-development, challenging norms. Today, Dylan, we're talking about 0 to 1, the book by Peter Thiel, also known as Peter Thiel. I don't know who or what his name is, but I say Thiel.
You asked me what podcast episode this was right before.
Oh, it's 45.
There he
45.
is.
5. What are we doing for 50?
We're doing a live stream somewhere, as long as my mom doesn't throw the router out.
We did one live stream, and I think you gave up. You said we need to do at least 3.
Got real scared.
Okay, we're talking about 0 to 1. It's the book about going from 0 to 1, which, as Thiel points out, is the hardest thing to do.
Can we address this right off the top?
Where
I call him Teal. I call him Teal the color. Is that not how you say it?
I don't know. I think it's 50-50. I learned Thiel, and then you hear anyone kind of in his realm, they say Thiel.
He's German, so...
You want to go Thiel?
I'm going to go Thiel.
I'm going to figure it out right now, how to pronounce Thiel. Tell us where you were. We're 4 hours late. You got the bends again?
One, I got the bends, and then immediately I want to talk about who should read this book and who should listen to this podcast. But yeah, got the bends. We're coming in a little bit late, but I did so much preparation for this. I am psyched. So, Belky, one, I guess you're still researching. So I want to talk about who should read this book and what the hell 0 to 1 means.
Yes.
Because, well, one, understand.
It's Thiel.
It's Thiel. All right,
Thiel.
Peter Thiel.
Confirmed.
Peter Thiel, we got to understand him because he is a quirky, intellectual Silicon Valley stud. And I guess we got to start in the 90s. And in 98 and 99, that's when they jumped into PayPal.
Please give us one of your history lessons. Please.
It's not going to be that in depth. So he gets into PayPal with his little PayPal mafia, just like, I don't know, a handful of dudes that end up starting 7 other billion-dollar companies after PayPal. But he gets in that interesting kind of approach to business we'll talk about later there. And then he sells that. They sell it to eBay for over $1 billion. Then he's one of the first investor, or he's the first outside investor in Facebook. He gets 10% of it, sells that for $1 billion a couple years ago. And then he starts Palantir, which is a big data company, which helps with like the CIA and other sort of anti-counterterrorism groups, and even like banks on Wall Street use big data. Also, Founders Fund, they invest in big companies. So he's basically $1 billion just killer. And what's the guy in the Silicon Valley show that they base off Peter Thiel?
It's probably like someone like Russ Hanneman. Is that the guy?
It's the main like investor dude, the like quirky kind of Asperger's.
Oh, you're right. He died. Oh, spoiler alert. I forget, but he's super weird. I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name. That's a great show, by the way. If we want to plug a show, Silicon Valley, it's right up this alley. So, did you say who this is for?
No, I didn't say anything. I just said Peter Thiel. So he's talking about 0 to 1, and normally the world is like 1 to infinity or whatever. It's like how to grow a company, and usually that's just incremental improvements, globally expanding the markets. But when you have this totally new, innovative idea, going from it not existing to now being a player in the market and ideally a monopoly, that's this book. So it's all about startups. Anyone into startups should be reading it if you haven't already.
Yeah, and so this was kind of the second time I've gone through it. First time I was about 15. I remember being so butthurt because at the time I was deep in. I had a company that was we were filed as a public benefit corporation, a B Corp. And I remember reading 0 to 1 and just being like, fuck you, Peter Thiel. Like, because it was so monopolistic, so capitalistic, so for profit, profit maximization. I don't think I understood it. But now going back, I'm like, oh no, he's very intentional with what he means by monopoly. And it's not monopolists who have hijacked the system and to profit maximize. He means monopoly in the sense that you are doing something so new and so innovative that nobody's done it before. It's something that's patentable so that you can control it and create it without having to get into the nitty gritty of like perfect competition, which we can talk about. And going back, I'm like, oh, okay, it's not so spiteful. Where do you want to start?
Well,
Did
one I
you
want
read
to
the
say
whole thing?
off of that.
Was this your first time?
No, second time. I kind of probably did the same thing, 15,
Okay.
16, got into it. But I think that happens a lot where people hear some of what he's saying and immediately just try and plug their ears and like, oh, this is craziness because he is so contrarian with all his ideas. But what he means is not like, oh, I'm going to be an oil monopolist, buy up all the oil companies, jack up prices. No, it's starting a new frontier. This doesn't exist. That's where you want to focus your attention for a new business, a new company.
Yeah, I'm looking up at one point there were, here it is. There are basically three kinds of monopoly, and then let's move on. But he said, some companies become monopolies by hijacking capitalism. That's basically what I just said, and using like dirty tactics to get there. A second kind of monopoly is the kind that gets like big governmental licenses and contracts. And that's kind of like crony capitalism, right? It's like friends hiring friends of government to do weird things. But he's saying that companies should want to achieve the monopoly stance that is a monopoly because they are so innovative and have something so unique to offer that any competition is left in the dust. That's the difference. And that's what I didn't understand when I was 15
Well, there isn't
years
even,
old.
there's no competition. Like his
Right.
thing is you got to be 10 times better than the nearest competitor.
Right.
And
for me, I was so upset because I was in one of the most competitive markets. It was it was multivitamins, right? And I was like, I'm not in a monopoly. I'm not doing. First of all, I'm 16 and I'm in this market. Clearly, I'm not doing something super innovative, and it really bothered me at the time. But yeah, now I see what he's saying.
so the big understanding is Peter Thiel is just trying to challenge all these norms. That's why I kind of like him, his whole contrarian stuff. Bam, getting back into the mission
Woo!
statement. But some of the norms, like this whole book, is about challenging what came out of the dot-com bubble and that bursting in the early 2000s. And so coming out of that, he had four principles or widely accepted truths. So we can go through them quickly, but one is be humble and make incremental advances. Two is stay lean and experiment agnostically. Three is don't try to create new markets suddenly. And then four is focus on product, not sales. So these were the main takeaways that the whole world had coming out of that burst.
Yeah,
And he's like, hey, these are completely wrong. Like we should not be having these as the main takeaways. And so that first one, kind of make incremental advances, that gets into like, you want to be that totally new innovator. I feel like he talked about disruptor. He doesn't like that term, but like you got to be new. You got to dominate whatever new market you're making.
yeah, and the Silicon Valley right now is so scared. Maybe not so much now as when he wrote the book 10 years ago. Wow, probably wrote it 10 years ago. 2014. Okay. Yeah, like you said, the dot-com bubble scared all of Silicon Valley away from the kind of big dreaming entrepreneurs, and so that's what's made Elon Musk so successful. He's just said screw all that, or any of the PayPal or Silicon Valley mafia, PayPal mafia.
That's what they say because he has his founders fund, which has I think 3 billion or something, several billion, and it's a venture capital firm, so he's constantly assessing companies, and what you have to realize is the top performer in your portfolio, that's going to outdo everything else. So if you're venture capital, one, you gotta look for the big dreamers actually like gonna change the world, and that's what's funny because he asks any new hire or any new company that comes in this same question, and it's what important truth do few people agree with you on? And I think that's something. I mean, it's funny because he talks about this in some of his YouTube videos, but he's like, not his, but some videos about him where he says, this is a question that everyone knows I'm going to ask, but it's still hard. Like usually when the question's released, you can prepare for it. But this one, like,
say that one more time.
What important truth do few people agree with you on?
Okay. Wow.
So the way to approach it is like, all right, what does everyone agree upon? And then what do you disagree about with it?
Okay. That seems easier.
And
but still,
there's a lot.
I can't think of something off the top of my head. I would need like 10 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I usually think of like global warming. I'm not as concerned as most people are. I think like that's number one for me. I think strangers being scary is
Hold
probably
on.
number
Hold
two.
on. Yeah, strangers being scary. I can get behind that. The global warming. Do you remember me, you, and our friend Tom? We were
Oh,
driving to the airport in Tanzania. Dylan has the audacity to say that biker. What'd you say? You said,
no,
say it.
okay. So
Say it right
here,
here.
Tom's like, I don't know, something about like he's biking to work, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I think people often think they're the saviors of the world, like putting solar panels or biking to work, and it's more efficient to drive in a car if
Oh,
we're talking
yeah.
about emissions.
But then you took it a step further and you said it's actually less optimal to bike to work because of how much you're going to eat.
Right, because you're a human machine, which
Yeah.
doesn't function as well as your car in terms of an engine and efficiency. So you have to somehow eat the calories,
I
and those
get it.
calories come from cows that
I get where
shoot
you're
out
coming
methane.
from. It was just a humongous argument. It went so much further than that. Um,
It, but my point is, everyone agrees upon this idea that, oh, we're doing good for the world, or like, again, I mentioned like solar panels. Yeah, but
well, I'll give you one. I'll give you one that I can get behind. Like everyone using reusable metal straws. But that metal straw takes 8,000 times as much oil to make than the plastic one, right?
right.
It seems like this awesome idea, but in reality, it's actually probably doing more harm than good. Or it would take a really long time for that harm to catch up with the metal straws.
That's why I love this question, because it really it tests your ability to
Let's
just
go on a
think for
tangerine,
yourself.
baby. Tangerine tangent.
Yeah, and so that's where like the best companies, you're not going to do what everyone else is doing. He talks about secrets, like certain
Yeah.
areas, certain fields. There aren't many secrets to be discovered, like basic math, chemistry, etc. But there are still a ton of secrets, say in the health sectors, or like so many fields where you can dig out these little nuggets.
Somebody else said like a startup, an entrepreneur or startup founders are somebody who have I want to say like a keen insight on the future or something. Something along those lines. I butchered it, so let's not go there. But yeah, in Secrets, that chapter, it's chapter 8 I've got written. We have this tendency to say there are no hard questions left. And what jumped to mind for me was physics in like the 1910s to 1920s. Everyone was like, we've got it figured out. Newton, Galileo, Einstein, like they figured it out. And then a year later, the study of quantum, they're like, physics is done. We figured it out. And then quantum mechanics comes to the forefront of science in the 1920s. It's like, we haven't even scratched the surface. That's the best example. I don't like what he said. So what he says in that chapter is if you learn a secret, be careful who you share it with. It could be dangerous to reveal your knowledge. As a rule of thumb, it's best not to share secrets with anyone except for those you need to tell. I'm not super on board with that. We've talked before, like nobody is going to do your secret or your thing or your insight better than you're going to do it. We've also agreed on the fact that remember when Kevin Kelly was like, I tell everyone my ideas and I try and kill them, and it's the ones that keep coming back that I act upon. Now we can say, okay, Kevin Kelly, Peter Thiel, like who's done more, Elon Musk, like in terms of secrets. Where do you stand on that though? Because I'm at a point in my life. I used to be like, okay, sign an NDA, let's have this really secretive talk, and now I'm like nobody's going to do what I'm going to do.
Well, I'm trying to think, like, say, take some of his companies, like, say he told someone about PayPal or something like that. Send money via email. Like, it comes down to what we read in what's the book? Derek Siver's book, Anything You Want.
Anything you want.
Anything You Want. Where, all right, yeah, sure, a good idea is important, but it's the execution. Maybe because he's surrounded in Silicon Valley, where like you tell an idea, someone can take it and run with it. Like the Social Network, is that what the Facebook
Yeah.
movie is? Where like Mark ran with that idea. I don't know, but I think at the end of the day, execution is important. But having this truly disruptive secret idea, it's putting more weight on that.
Yeah, you know
I
what?
thought.
Now that I think about it, it depends on who you are and who you tell.
Right. Right. You tell
So
your high school friends, probably doesn't matter, but you tell people in Silicon Valley.
right. So I'm thinking like McDonald's, right? The McDonald's brothers started McDonald's in Santa Barbara, I believe, and they had this like really awesome little mom and pop hamburger place. And then Ray Kroc comes along, and he's their salesman. He's selling them like Frosty machines. And the difference was like Ray Kroc had this drive and determination he was just a shrewd business. Like he had this vision to build out something that the two McDonald's brothers would have never done. Um, so I'm thinking, okay, if you're Ray Kroc and you tell someone your idea for McDonald's, like nobody's going to do it like you are. But if you're these kind of like slow and traditional McDonald's brothers, and someone like Ray Kroc comes around, or like you say, maybe people in the Silicon Valley, then yeah, you could be in trouble. I just feel like in terms of execution, like my ideas, no, if anyone's going to execute on them, it's me, the unemployed guy. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes to
come
execution.
on, what else you got for me?
Well,
Yep. What's your favorite part?
One, I wanted to. All right, my favorite part. I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I do like how he's just constantly assessing the world. Kind of like that Mark Twain quote of like, whenever you find yourself on the side of majority, stop and reflect, basically. And I think having that mindset constantly is good. This is more. I think it's more for like truly game changing companies, but we can take it. And I've been thinking about this myself. Like, how can we be Smart Nonsense or whatever ventures that we'll talk about in the future with you? How can we be 10 times better than any existing competitor for podcasts? Like, it's interesting to think about how you can really innovate here. Maybe it's not meant for us, but it's still like, what's your unique value proposition? Did you have a
takeaway, Pap?
I read.
Yeah, so wow, I really like that. Maybe you can't monopolize, right? Like you're not going to monopolize podcasts, and my next venture is something that's kind of been done in a couple of different veins, but it's like, yeah, how can we be 10% or 10x better than the next person in line? I also like there were good takeaways in terms of building a team and building foundations. Yeah, he says like roles should be well defined. Small boards are better than big boards. Oh, I really like. I forget where it is, but he talks about the CEO and CEO pay. I think there's this tendency, especially in Silicon Valley, to found something and be the CEO and then take home $2 million a year in bonuses or whatever when you have a public offering. And what Thiel says here is like, no, I forget the exact dollar amount, but he's like the CEO needs to be making no more than 150,000, which should also be no more than like 2 or 3x your lowest level employee, so, something like that. And I thought for someone who's as shrewd and as monopolistic as Thiel is, that was a really good point. And it's crazy, like the things people are getting paid in Silicon Valley.
Well, I don't know if it was as binary as this, but he's like, either they're the cap, like no one can make more than the CEO, and that's good. Like you want people invested, having ownership, or they're the very bottom, and like they're taking no salary and just have all the skin in the game.
Oh, that's what I really like. Let me pull it up. It was a graph. Okay, the founder paradox. It's chapter 14. And he's got a chart with negative traits. This is getting to your point about the founders having nothing or being capped at the top, or the CEO. On one side of the bell curve is negative traits. On the other side is positive traits. And it's a bell curve because most people are average. They've got some negative traits. They've got some positive traits. Then he's like, well, founders aren't normal people, and they tend to extreme those extremes. They tend to occupy the extremes of the bell curve. And sometimes founders occupy both extremes at once. They have like really, really negative traits and really, really positive traits about them. And the example for that is founders or CEOs being cash poor, but rich on paper. Right?
Am I supposed to add to this?
I was like, it was interesting. We get to this all the time. It's like, why are all the most successful founders like these immigrant founders who had nothing, who came here, who grinded, right? They were cash poor, but they're so rich on paper. It's because of this founder paradox where these founders are these types of people that can be at both extremes at the same time of this bell curve of traits.
Here's what
It just
I
felt
liked,
like us.
actually.
All right.
I liked how, I don't know where in the book, maybe in the beginning, he talks about how there might actually be more founders than the world needs. As in, if you're a smart person, there are so many companies that are already at 1 and they're just trying to go to whatever N level. They're trying to go to 100, 200, 300, whatever it is. And it's much easier to just join a Google and contribute value there than, start this totally new market and really succeed with your startup. So he's actually kind of pushing people away. It's like, hey, this shit's hard. Like, that's why so many fail. And I think we're sending too many people there when maybe more should just be focused on the 1 through whatever phase of company.
Okay, but then he's also got the Thiel Fellowship to bring more people into founder positions instead of going to college, right?
Yeah.
I guess, it's limited.
But they only
like
take 20 to 30 people
right,
a year.
Right. Would you, if you did it, I actually heavily consider this because, things were in line. I had a startup. It was pretty developed. And I was also a senior in high school. I was like, do I go to college or do I indulge in the Thiel Fellowship? What would you do if you did it again? And what was interesting was this video you sent me, which you should talk about. Because again, I think Peter Thiel gets this rep that he's so anti-college because of his fellowship. He's paying entrepreneurs to not go to college, but like that's a clickbait headline. It's not true. What does he say in terms of going to college?
There's a lot in that video. Well, one he talks about, all right, who is he trying to appeal to? Like his big issue is student loans and debt. Like he is fed up with people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and really just indebting themselves to the system when it's really just an insurance policy nowadays. Like that's why you do it. I've said this before. Like the reason why I like the Brown degree is like, I can always get a job. So it's
That's
insurance.
The insurance.
There.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying, and he says this, he's like, I would still probably go back. He went to Stanford, then Stanford Law after. He'd still go back most likely. And usually says like, hey, if you're in, one of the elite top schools, it's worth going. But if it's like 100 plus in terms of the rankings, it's probably not worth it.
He says it's not worth it, maybe. But his other point is like, go to college, fine, or don't go to college, fine. Just sit down and know why you're doing that. Why are you going through the motions? Why are you going and doing student council and being student council president and joining the football team and getting good grades and getting a perfect, why? Like, why are you doing that? And this is what we're starting to talk about in every single episode is like, sit down and just figure out why you're doing these things.
I don't maybe that's the ultimate purpose of this podcast is just if we can get a couple people to sit down and take out a piece of paper and write like, why am I doing this shit? Like that's his big question is like, people, just society expects me to do it, so I'm going to do it. No, question society, question this whole idea. And then maybe it's a truth that you don't adhere to.
I wish I did hear that because I don't think I did sit down 4 or 5 years ago and say, why am I going to college? Because I was pretty close to taking a gap year. I was pretty close to deciding like maybe I don't need to go to college. And then I went for the insurance, right?
I think it's also something that people should do on an ongoing process. Like I want to do it now. Like,
yeah.
Why am I starting a podcast? You know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it tonight, and report on it tomorrow when we talk about your venture.
True. So what? I got to come up with why I'm doing that?
Yeah. Plus your truth that,
I got homework.
You got homework.
And I don't have anywhere to write it.
So I'm curious. Oh, I guess we can. I don't know if we want to harp on the whole college thing, but he does say how there is the problem of like if colleges have that signaling problem where you want to show you that you're elite. Same thing with the Thiel Fellowship, which has like 0.1% acceptance rate. It's not like a Harvard is going to be like, you know what? We have such an awesome education that we're going to accept 10 times as many students this year. because like come on in, learn, and like even online they could do it because it's infinitely scalable now, but they're not because you don't want that elite status. And also the interesting thing too with parents that actually care. Oh, what he says is like he realized that life is just this ongoing tournament, this competition of, you know, when you get to say a Brown or a Stanford or something like that, you get in and like, oh, you made it. But what they should be telling you is like, oh, you made the first round, and now there's infinite more rounds.
And everyone is way better than you. You know,
it doesn't
forward.
stop. It never stops. So you really got to question why you're doing these certain things. I'm liking him more and more. I actually watched this Gawker versus Thiel documentary with Hulk Hogan. It's I forget the title of it. Nobody Speak, I think, on Netflix. Pretty good, but he was just villainized in this Netflix documentary, and I'm like, when you listen to these
I think
people,
it's
vilified. Thank you, villainized. Jesus Christ, vilified.
And, it should be villainized. Fuck that. In terms of like truths about the world that I don't agree with or that people don't agree with, it should be villainized. Vilified. Where is there an F in villain?
Thank you, Belky. So I think that's a lot of people. He's libertarian, so I find a lot of libertarians like you get their logic usually checks out.
Vilified it means a completely different thing. Vilify means to speak or write about in an abusively disparaging manner.
No, that's
to
right.
To vilify somebody.
Even with the dictionary, we don't know what it means.
Villainized.
I think vilified is the right word. I was just wrong.
What were you saying?
But basically, like you understand, like people are just scared with this contrarian idea, but you get to the heart of what he means, and a lot of it makes sense. So I would say read the book.
Yeah, what's everyone's deal with libertarians? We should talk about that at some point. I know there's like some crazy, like you can go way out, but I think there are a lot of libertarians. Like, I don't know, it's such a negative thing to be a libertarian, we can talk about that another time. I also think
it's fascinating to me because I'm all for it. I think there are a lot of areas where it fails, and I actually listened to Thiel talk about long-term societal costs.
Villainize is a word, I think.
Oh yeah, look at me. Look at us.
Yeah, I just saw, I forget on what podcast or what show it was on, but someone was saying privatize roads, and like that's where you got to stop. There's some crazy things, but I forget where that was.
Here, real quick, couple other quick takeaways.
Yeah.
I like how with a company, with a startup, you're trying to build a cult, create this cult.
No, he said don't do that. Well,
you do. You want like everyone full-time, fully invested, as much ownership as possible. Like you are not clocking in and out. You're willing to work, and you don't even look at the clock. You're so excited about what you're doing. And also he talks about kind of the clean energy tech movement, clean tech, and how that failed. And he could tell it was failing because you'd have all these people coming in suits. And he's like, all right, people with suits clearly aren't the actual techies that are making the quality stuff. So he had a rule of like anyone that comes into the suit, just kick them to the door. They're kick them to the curb, whatever.
I think this was the first book too, where again, this was 2014, but I think he was talking about like just wearing a t-shirt and jeans. Like why are we so uptight when it comes to wearing a suit and tie? Like why is that the status?
Recurring theme. Be casual in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I read that 15 or 16, that's when I like stopped dressing up for things. Like if I had an interview, like I wasn't going in a button down. Like,
well, that's
just not
funny enough. Sorry to jump in, but with like when I joined this dating company thing, they're like, don't be the tryhard that gets in a suit when he's going out to a nightclub. Like just wear a cool t-shirt or something.
Just be a freaking normal person.
Like just dress nice and casual. And that's actually a lot of people at Brown. Like you look at them and their shit looks elegant but casual and like normal.
I think this Sigma made all of their freshmen wear suits like every Thursday. That was kind of funny. Just walking around campus in suits.
Yeah.
Oh, hazing.
Last thing I want
to
point I want to make with not enough attention on sales, and there's this I forget the movie that they referenced, but basically the nerds hate the sales guys because the sales guys are just hanging out, shooting the shit with people, but they don't realize like good sales looks like that. It looks casual, normal, and And it's so important. He says it's at least as important, if not more, than the actual product itself. You need to be able to sell. Otherwise, you don't have cash flow. You can't grow the business.
Yeah, so he then put a heavy emphasis on like it's okay to advertise, and that going back just now is kind of difficult because I've been in this Seth Godin mode. Seth Godin, Derek, like um, don't advertise. Your diehards will like find you, and they'll grow from 1 to 10 to 20. So then Peter Thiel's like, no, like advertise to grow, and I'm kind of stuck in the middle now.
He does basically a couple calculations that you should know.
Yes.
One is the lifetime value of your customers. So have that number. Like, what is Henry worth if he's buying my product over time? And then what is your cost to acquire Henry?
That's the big one for me is customer acquisition. That's
right.
Like,
so
yeah.
You can still market. Like, you can take the free approach that you'll do with, reaching out on Twitter and seeing if people share stuff. Or you can just invest, but make sure the lifetime value of your customer is at least 3 times what's the cost to acquire that customer is. Usually, like, make sure the cash flow makes sense. Like, if it pays off in 10 years, but you need money now, then that makes no sense. But that's a big one. And then the other one, what the shit is this?
You want me? Can I give one more?
Oh, no. One real quick with people sharing with each other, because this happened with eBay. Actually, I want to talk about that real quick with eBay too after this. But you want this virality coefficient. I actually think in the lean startup I heard it first. But
yes, yeah.
With, like, say, Henry is a viewer of a Smart Nonsense podcast. Is he going to share it with one person? Is he going to share it with 2 people, 3 people? And so that coefficient, if he shares it with 3 people, is 3. And the higher you get, then just the more quickly you're going to grow as a company.
Which gets into network effects. Like the strongest, best companies you could build right now, at least, are companies that leverage network effects. And basically that's the notion that like your platform, your business, whatever, is more powerful with more people on board, right? Facebook is nothing without more people on board. I remember Snapchat when it was invented. A buddy of mine, we were all 10 of us were sitting in the basement, and one had Snapchat. He was like, yo, guys, like, I just got Snapchat. You can send pictures and they delete after 10 seconds. Like, you have to get it. That's a network effect. He couldn't use the app without the 9 of us also using it.
So it's kind of a chicken and the egg, though.
Yeah.
They talk about, and you can see this with Uber. I remember it's like, that's why he talks about dominating the mini markets, like be the monopolist, because if you're trying to be, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, but like a company that's connecting people, you don't want to go for the whole world or United States. Like, focus on your niche. Maybe it's just Chicago or like a subset of Chicago. That's the best way you can start growing there and then expand. Same thing with Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Kind of along those lines, the last thing, at least for me from this book, it was chapter 12. And I go back and forth with people on this a lot, but it was basically humans versus robots. And so I think there's this it's obvious, like robots are taking people's jobs. And I think there's this fear that we'll get to a point where computers can do everything. And I think to say that it is really untrue. Peter Thiel says, stop worrying about computers taking over the world or taking human jobs. Like the two things don't compute, right? And I remember watching an interview, I think it was on Marquez Brownlee's channel.
Compute or compete? I'm confused.
The two things don't, like humans compete and compute.
Okay.
Sorry, I might have confused the two. But I remember on Marquez's YouTube channel once he was interviewing Elon Musk, and they were on the assembly line, and he asked him this question, like robots versus humans, like, because there's still so many humans on Tesla's production line. And Elon's like, yes, like computers are good at doing the same thing over and over again. But if there is, a wire that's not in this XYZ coordinate, like the computer robot freaks the fuck out, where the human just sees the wire, can grab it anywhere and like know what to do with it. Like those jobs, like you can never ever have a computer take those jobs because humans are better.
Because there's the issue of the singularity, and like, if once computers get smarter than us, they're gonna pretty much instantly take over everything. But one, he says this is like not a problem for this century. Like that's 22nd century. We're not there yet. They're just doing basic tasks. But even with our own projects, like right now, we have automated transcription. Computer can talk about or say what we're saying pretty well, but you need the human touch for the last 5% to get it perfect, or last 1%. Maybe that's getting better and better, but it's still like you need that. It's not going to be perfect. So it's that complementary nature versus substitution.
Right. And there will always be new jobs to take care of new robots coming, right? Like the market will keep changing, jobs will keep growing, and then humans will just be left. And Naval says this a lot. Naval Ravikant, it says like humans will be left to just the creative stuff, where computers are really good at crunching numbers and doing big data and sensors and all that stuff. Humans can focus on the arts and like the high level stuff.
The fun shit.
Exactly.
Last point I want to make is with PayPal, they had this issue of sending money, and they're like, let's send money over email because it was so hard. Like you can only send checks back then. So the only people that were really using their service was immigrants sending money abroad to their families and stuff like that. That was the only real traction they had, and it just wasn't working. So they were like, all right, let's reassess our market. Like, who should our ideal customer be? And they realized people like Henry on eBay that are transacting all the time, they needed a way to send money. So that once they realized who their market was, they just crushed it, dominated it, because they were over 10 times better than sending a check or however you used to.
Yeah, that's what you used to do. You used to send a check like in
That
the
is
mail
insane.
or a wire. It was craziness.
How did that company even exist? Like who would send? I guess people. I've never written.
They were like e-checks or something. I don't know. It was wacky, and it was interesting because PayPal came to fruition like when I was 6-7 years old. We've talked about those kind of first items I sold on eBay, and I remember it was like check versus PayPal, and not everyone had gone over to PayPal yet, but here we are, and they rule the world in terms of online transacting. It's pretty crazy.
So I'm finding that I like these book clubs more and more because it solidifies a lot of takeaways in my head. I think, kind of recapping for myself, it is the biggest takeaway is competition is for losers. That's his great quote. It's like, find the market where you can just dominate it and make sure that you have some little secret sauce where you're 10 times better than the competitor if you really want to succeed. And once you dominate that market, you can start to expand from there. And that's the best way to grow.
That's it. And, you know, he's not saying like, don't compete, right? Like he's not saying, oh, every Etsy artist who's kind of just like competing with one another on this, like he's not saying don't do that, but he's like, if you really want to make technological change, not just being computer technology, but like widespread change, then you have to monopolize the thing you do, and you have to be 10 times better, 100 times better than anybody else. Yeah, that's it, Pap. I have like a whole bunch more points. Like you said, I love these book clubs because never have I like written up a whole page of notes on every chapter of a book. And they live online, so I can go back to them anytime. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So tomorrow, 1, you have your homework. 2, we're talking about Dunbar, which is your project. We're going to get deep in that. But yeah, again, think about where
we got to bring more energy. We got to bring more nonsense.
Well, I was dead. I'm feeling better now. I think I just needed to see a person because I was just locked upstairs. You know,
you got to get some fresh air.
I did yesterday. I walked a couple miles. It felt good. Listening to this book. So we'll see you tomorrow, Belky. I'm gonna write down why I'm doing this whole podcast in my life. You do the same.
Yes, and you need from me a truth that I believe that most people don't agree with, right?
I want to hear that.
Okay, tomorrow.
All right. See you then. Ya.